Hello everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to our institution of Global Professional Free Webinar. Thank you all for joining and stay with us till the end. My lovely audience, today I am your host for the afternoon. My name is Yarani Sakhtar Chaudhuri and I am from Bangladesh. Dear audience, I am proud to be associated with IGP as a global member. I feel honored and privileged to host this webinar. It's my delight to welcome all of you to our institution of global professional. I feel honored and privileged to host this webinar. Thank you all for joining us today in this marvelous afternoon, and it's my humble request to all of you stay with us till the end. And don't forget to tag, share, and mention your friends. Institution of Global Professionals serves student and community resource, providing holistic social work and education for create a competent generation. IGP is a leading on online skill development institute with thousands of learners worldwide. Institution of Global Professional is an educational institution provides social work with globally recognized. We organized our webinar training offline online courses is by best and trained speaker coaches from the world. Our mission is empowered to people. And we have already completed 1021 webinars successfully. Let me remind you again, don't forget to tag, share, and mention your friends. So let's watch together and learn together. Today, our webinar number is 1022, and our webinar topic is referring a research article. And we have our speaker, as our speaker name is Dr. Rhoda Besico Gilan Jeso. She is from Philippines. She is MAD coordinator, faculty teacher, education department, faculty graduate school, co-chairperson, institutional research ethics committee, Mountain Province State Polytechnic College. Let's welcome our speaker. Hello, ma'am. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
How are you, ma'am?
Yeah, I'm fine. So, are we going live?
Yes, I'm. We are already in live. Ma'am, first you have to give your short description about yourself. Then you can start your presentation.
Okay, so I'm Roda Galanco. I work at Mountain Province State Polytechnic College. It's in Bontoc Mountain Province, Philippines. So I am currently the coordinator for the Master of Arts Education program of the same college, while serving as a faculty member also of the of the Teacher Education Department and the School of Advanced Education. So this afternoon, I am going to present a topic titled Referring a Research Article. I will be mentioning always next slide because I am not operating my presentation. I cannot access StreamYard on my laptop. So the kind lady who is with me now will be the one to operate my presentation. Okay, next slide, please. Hello, next slide. So I would like to mention that I am a peer reviewer of institutional and organizational research journals in the Philippines, Indonesia, India, US, Australia, Mexico, among others. My experience as a peer reviewer for research articles started way back in year 2000, and up to this time, I am actively involved in peer reviewing of research articles. And I have no conflict of interest in this presentation. Okay, next slide. So my topic is on peer review. What is it? I would like to contextualize my topic in research article publication for research article for journal publication. So before I'm going to give you the tips on peer reviewing, I would like to give a brief description of what peer review is as a process so that we would understand its value in research publication. When a journal asks you to subject your paper to the peer review process, it is because they would like to assess your paper's quality, its validity, and its originality, whether it could contribute to the existing body of knowledge. The intention of peer review is not to reject research for publication, but simply to ensure that the knowledge being disseminated out there is accurate, it is reviewed by professionals, it is reviewed by colleagues, it is valid, and it is of good quality. Next slide. It is not because we have completed the research that we could already publish it. It is understood that in our own institution, we have our own peer review process. It could be it is usually an open review process, open review process. It is not a blind review, open process in the sense that we know whose paper we are reviewing, and the authors know who is also reviewing our paper. However, when we go for journal publication, peer review in the perspective of a publisher is a process that is ensured to filter the content of the journal so that they could give you advice whether your journal could be published or it could be better published in another journal, because many journal editors would like to maintain the brand of their journal. And that's the reason why there are some journals that are indexed in Scopus, in the Web of Science, or other international indexing journals. It's because they would like to maintain the quality of their journals. So if they're going to run our papers for their peer review process, it is to ensure also that our paper gets a higher value. It gets a higher premium among all other papers that are published. Why? If our paper is peer reviewed, it is an assurance that our paper is of good material. The information contained in our paper is worth reading. It is worth mentioning in our paper if we are going to do a similar study. And that is the reason why journal editors have to ensure really that the peer review process is robust. Robust in the sense that it is not just one person who is reviewing the paper, but there are sometimes 2, 3, or 4 persons who are involved in the peer review process. So next slide, please. What are the things that we have to consider when we go for peer review of journals? Next slide. Next slide. Okay. I got this from the Committee for Publication Ethics. The Committee for Publication Ethics is actually the Bible of any journal editor, a journal publisher, a research author who wants to publish in a journal, and a peer reviewer. So you can find this in the website of COPE, that is Committee on Publication Ethics. So the first column here pertains to the certain aspects of publication. The second column refers to the stage. Second, third, and fourth column refers to the stages of journal publication. Preprint there means when you get notice that your paper is accepted for possible journal publication. Take note, the term is possible journal publication. Why? Because it can happen that in the process of peer review, your peer reviewer is going to reject your paper for publication. Okay, so there is just an assurance that your paper could possibly be published. Then the pre-publication, that is the stage just before the publication of the paper, to see to it that everything went well, everything is okay before they are going to finally publish the paper. And then the last column there's the post-publication. That happens after the paper has already been published. So usually this does not this is not observed by many journals, but there are some scientific and academic journals that observe this post-publication review. And it usually happens 3 months after the paper has been published. So during the preprint stage of the publication, the peer reviewers are identified by the journal. So the two, the author and the peer reviewer, do not know each other. If you're the reviewer, you do not know whose paper you're actually reviewing. Now, during the pre-publication, it is possible that you as the reviewer is going to communicate now with the author of the paper. And then post-publication, but during the pre-publication, it is just you as the peer reviewer who knows who the author is, or it is possible that the author knows you, but you do not know the author. But during the post-publication, both of you know each other's identity already. Okay, so the process is just like that. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the process that we go through in journal publication. So before your paper is published in the journal, even if there is an acceptance letter, please take note that the acceptance letter is not an assurance that your paper will be published. So you get a notification that your paper is accepted. However, you have to wait because your paper will go through the peer review process. And then that would take for at most 6 months. There are journals where you have to wait for 6 months before they are going to return the results of the peer review. Then after which you have to incorporate the suggestions of the peer reviewers. And then that will go back again to the editor. But then again, take note that even if the decision of the peer reviewer is to accept your paper for publication, there is still no guarantee that your paper will be published. Why? Because your paper will again go through the screening of the editorial board members. So they are going to vote. Does your paper fit in the theme of the journal? Is your paper worthy for publication? So the editorial board could actually overrule the decision of the peer reviewer. So there are certain instances when you would think, hey, my paper got accepted. According to my peer reviewer, it is accepted for publication. How come it was not published? Well, probably because the editorial board member decided that it's not yet time for you to publish that paper. Probably it will be published in the next issue of the journal, or they're going to refer you to another journal. If you will be referred to another journal, that means to say you have to go through the peer review process again of the journal. Okay, so good if your paper was accepted by your reviewer for publication and then the editorial board members approved for its publication. Okay, and then your paper gets published, after which the journal editor could request for a post-publication review of your paper. There are some journals that do not have actually any rigorous peer review process. Sometimes you just get a notice that your paper is good for publication, and then they are going to give you an invoice that you have to pay already. And before your paper is published, you have to pay for the APC, that is the article publication charge. Okay, next slide, please. Let's think of ourselves as the peer reviewer of an article. Take note that what we are reviewing is a paper that is already formatted according to the style and format of the journal. Because when you are going to submit your paper for the peer review process, you should have already browsed the author's guidelines of that particular journal and formatted your paper according to their requirements. Remember also that when we are reviewing a paper for publication, that paper has already undergone an internal review. Like if they have a peer review process in their institution, it was reviewed by their ethics board, it was reviewed by their scientific research board. Or if it is a paper, it is an academic paper, it's a thesis or a dissertation, it has already been reviewed by the panel members. And so everything is okay, they approved of it, and now they say your paper could go for publication. So as peer reviewers, there are some things that we then have to take into consideration because this time we are not panel members, we are not institutional reviewers, but we are reviewers tapped by a certain journal to review a paper that was submitted for publication. So here are some things that we have to bear in mind when we are going to review. Okay. So take note that we are helping the journal establish its quality or maintain its quality. And therefore, we have to see to it that the paper really actually meets the requirement of the journal. And therefore, we also have to be familiar with the journal policies, particularly the author's guideline, because we are gatekeepers in ensuring that the knowledge that will be disseminated in the journal is accurate and it is acceptable to the scientific community. Next slide, please. So what ethical guidelines should we follow when refereeing? Again, I refer you to the Committee on Publication Ethics, since that is the Bible of peer reviewers when it comes to ethics in publication. Okay, so next slide, please. Just a moment. Something is interfering. So since we play a pivotal role in ensuring that the integrity of the journal is maintained, then we have to see to it that the peer review process is also acceptable, that the process that we are going to do is acceptable since we are involved in it. We have to remember that the peer review process depends to a large extent on our willingness to participate as peer reviewers. If we know that the material we are going to review does not fit our background, we are not competent to review the material content-wise and methods-wise, you are not familiar with the method that was used by the author, then we can always decline. It is ethical to decline. It is unethical to accept if we know that we do not have the capability or we do not have the competence. Okay, and then we also have the ethical obligation to ensure that we maintain the integrity of the peer review process. I'm going to talk about that in a little while. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so we have to clearly communicate with the journal editor, because there may be some things that we need to clarify with them. When we receive an invitation from a journal editor to review a certain paper, they will just simply tell us what the topic is about, but they are not going to tell us usually what the methodology is. So if you think that you are qualified to review the paper because it says so in the title of the study, then you can communicate with the journal editor to give you further details, such as what was the design used by the author. Okay, if you are not going to do that, you are just simply going to accept. It may be too late to communicate the non-acceptance, your non-acceptance for the paper to be reviewed. Meaning, it may be when you already have the paper that you are going to communicate to the editor that you do not have the competence methods-wise to review the paper. That is going to delay the peer review process. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay. So what are the ethical guidelines that we should follow when we are referring? Next slide. Okay. Remember that in peer review, double-blind review is usually followed. Double-blind means we do not know who the author is. The author does not know who we are also. That is double-blind. Okay? So it is unethical for us to be contacting the author without the permission of the journal. Although we do not know who the author is, sometimes there are indications that we know who is the owner of the paper. Several times I have this experience. Okay? Because when I do, or when I perform reading of some thesis or dissertation, reading is usually at the end of the stage before the paper is is finally approved. Okay. So sometimes there are instances when we think we know the identity of the author. Let us not contact the author, because ethics of peer review says there should be no communication between the reviewer and the author. If you would like to communicate something to the author, then channel it through the journal editor. We also have to maintain and respect the confidentiality of the peer review process. If you receive, sometimes there are journals who give a certificate of peer review. If you receive that, do not post it in your Facebook account or any social media account. Why? Because you are already going against the confidentiality of the peer review process. You revealed who you are. You revealed the paper that you have reviewed. But if you really would like to do that because you are proud to have been tapped as a peer reviewer, then you have to erase the title. It is okay that the name of the journal will appear, but please, you delete the title of the journal, the paper that you have reviewed. Okay. We also have to refrain from using information from the paper that is sent to us let's say, since the paper was not yet published, its quality is not yet established because the peer review process is not yet complete. So if you have a paper that is related to a topic that you are discussing, let's say in your class, do not use it as an example. Do not talk about it with your colleague. You can do that when the paper is already published. But at the time that you are holding the paper for your review, the information there is strictly for you. It is not for you to share to others. Next one, please. Next slide. During the peer review process, there are only 3 people who are involved. You, the editor, 2 people, you and the editor. Communication is just between you and the editor of the journal. So, since you accepted the paper for publication, accepting means you believe that you are competent. You have the competence to review it. Now, you notice that in the methodology section, the method or the design is something new, something that you are not familiar with. Do not ask someone, do not ask a colleague about it and say that this researcher, I am reviewing a paper and this researcher has used this method. Do you think it is the appropriate method? No, you are not supposed to discuss the paper with anyone else. Since you accepted it, it is your responsibility to do a research on the methodology that was used if you are not familiar with it. Otherwise, skip that part. Anyway, in the evaluation portion, there is a section there where you have to write something for the editor, a confidential note to the editor. And probably you can write there that I did not review the methods part because I am not familiar with the design that was used by the author. I reviewed the content only. That is okay. Anyway, you are not the only reviewer of the paper. You are in tandem with other reviewers. So there may be other reviewers who are familiar with the design. So if you are not familiar with the design, then skip that part and reveal it later in the note to the editor. Okay? And then if you discover something that makes you think there is already a conflict of interest in your capacity as a peer reviewer, then you have to notify the editor of the journal and seek advice. For example, it could be that the paper that you are reviewing, you were one of the respondents. That is already a conflict of interest on your part because you had something to do with the research itself. Okay. Or let us say you are affiliated with the agency that funded the research. So there is already an economic interest in the study. So if you believe that in the process of reviewing the paper, you feel that there is a conflict of interest, then you better notify the journal editor. And it is up to the discretion of the journal editor if you will continue reviewing the paper or they will withdraw the paper and assign it to another reviewer. Okay, next slide. Okay, again, I go back to notifying the journal editor. That's why it is important that when you receive an invitation from a journal editor to review a certain paper, then you have to request additional information about it, because the initial invitation will just tell you the topic of the paper. So it is to the best interest of the paper and to your best interest also if you are going to ask the journal editor additional details such as what methodology was used by the author. Okay, because in the process you might discover that you don't really have the expertise to review the paper. If you sometimes journal editors would give us 15 days, 20 days, or 30 days to review the paper and return it with our comments and with our evaluation, our overall evaluation of the paper. Do not wait for a month before you are going to communicate to the journal editor that you do not have the competence to review the paper because you are not familiar with the topic or because you are not familiar with the method that was used. Okay, that is going to compromise the integrity of the peer review process. And then, as I mentioned a while back, if you are not familiar with the methodology, but you are familiar with the topic, you can go on reviewing it and then indicate in the note to the editor that there is a certain part of the paper that you did not review because it is beyond your expertise. Indicate that in the note to the editor. Okay, next slide, please. Okay. Part of the peer review process is writing our comments and our suggestions. In the evaluation form, there is a section there where you are going to write comments for the editor, for the author to comply. And there are comments that you are going to write also for the editor. So you tell the author, these are my observations, these are the areas for improvement. On the part of the editor, you also inform the editor, these are my observations about the paper of the author. What you have written to the author should match what you have written for the editor. However, there is again a section of the peer review form where you have to write a confidential note for the editor. The note for the author, your comments for the author will be communicated by the editor to that author. Okay, it will be transmitted. But for that confidential note for the editor, that will not be communicated to the author. That will be for the editor. If you think that the paper is acceptable in its current state, okay, you tick that decision box. Accepted in its current state. There's another decision box there which says rejected. There's another decision box there that says accepted for publication with minor suggestions, with minor corrections. If you tick that box, rejected for publication, there is a reason for that. That is what you are going to explain to the editor. Okay? So why are you not recommending that article for publication? If, let's say, you noticed when you were reading the article that you have, it seems like you remembered reading it in another journal. You remember reading it somewhere else. And then you finish reading it. Then you say, hey, this is the same article that I have reviewed previously. Then you have to write that in the confidential note for the editor. Okay, I have that experience twice actually. The first one, the first time, the paper, I did not recommend it for publication. So we are not yet in that slide is okay. So I wrote to the editor that this paper is not good for publication because there are defects of the paper that were not addressed. I received another paper. 6 months later, I received a paper from another journal. I received it for review. I was surprised. It was the same paper that I reviewed, exactly the same title. And so I wrote to the editor via that confidential that section that I have reviewed this paper. It was submitted to this journal and it was not approved for publication. It is up to the editor to make the decision. Okay, our role as peer reviewer is to simply look at the quality of the paper, endorse it for publication if we think that it is good. There was also this instance where I have not approved of the publication of a paper because of major flaws in the methodology. The methodology was not the appropriate one according to my uh, evaluation, according to my assessment as the peer reviewer. However, when I received a copy of the journal, I noticed that it was published. I communicated with the editor and asked why the paper was published despite the rejection decision on my part as the peer reviewer. The answer of the editor was that it was approved by the members of the editorial board for publication. I could not contest that anymore because we peer reviewers do not make the decision whether the paper should be published or it should not be published in the journal. It is the editorial board and it is the journal editor who makes the final decision. So we might be questioning, then how come the paper goes through this process of peer review? Well, that is a process that is adopted by journals to ensure that the name of their journal is not compromised. That's one reason. The other reason is to ensure that the information being disseminated is filtered in terms of its accuracy, in terms of its quality, in terms of its validity, and in terms of its appropriateness. But as peer reviewers, we do not have the right to question the decisions of the editorial board members or the journal editor as to why a paper we rejected was approved for publication. Okay, next slide. So I'm going to give you tips in refereeing. You cannot find this in books. The tips I'm going to give you are based on my years of experience as a peer reviewer. So if you try it and it does not work, well, maybe my practice works for me, but it does not work for you. Okay. So this is what I do. When I receive a paper for review, immediately I log into the internet and check the website of the journal. I'll check the policies in relation to the guide for the authors in the journal that is adopted by the style that is adopted by the journal, because there are some journal that require a section for review of related literature. There are journals that do not require a separate section for review of related literature. There are journals where results and discussion are fused as one, and there are journals where results and discussion are separate sections. Okay, so I have to familiarize myself with the policies of the journal before I read the paper of the author. Okay, there's also a section on the author's guide. What should be the things that the author should consider when submitting a paper? So first, I look at the format. Okay, is the journal making use of APA format? Is it making use of CSC? Citation style, is it making use of MLA or whatever? Okay, so that's the first thing that I do. I familiarize myself with the policies of the journal. And then the next thing is I review the manuscript in one sitting. Sometimes journal, if according to the journal policy, the maximum number of pages is 15, excluding references. Normally, many journals would require that. Okay, there are also journals that would require just 10 pages, excluding or including the references or the literature cited. So if I notice that the paper is 15 pages content, excluding the literature cited, then I allot one weekend to read that. I will not read it in the evening because I know my time is limited. I will have to allot one weekend, one day for me to read that paper. Why? Because let's say I read it tonight, I read the first 2 pages, and then tomorrow I'm going to read 3 pages. The next day I'm going to read the other pages. Or today, at 8 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to read the first 2 pages. Then I stop. And then I'm going to continue reading at 12 o'clock. And then I'm going to continue reading at 2 o'clock. So it's intermittent. There is now a disruption of the flow of thought. It would not be fair for the author of the journal if we cannot see the totality of the article in one sitting. That's why it is important that when we read the manuscript, we have to do it continuously in one sitting from the title down to the references. Okay, this one. Then, after reading, we reflect on what we have read based on the journal policy. Are there some deviations from the journal policy that we have noted? We list them down. If we are experts on the topic or on the subject matter of the journal article, and there are things that we think, we believe are important to be included in the paper that they were not considered, then we write them down again in a separate sheet of paper. Okay? So we do that after reading the manuscript in one sitting. Then after that, well, anyway, we are given 15 days or 30 days, probably, well, tomorrow or next week, I'm going to continue reading when I have the time. But I have to see to it that I beat the deadline in fairness to the author of the research article. Okay. So after that, the next process I would do is to read again the manuscript, give comments and suggestions. The review tools of Microsoft Word are very helpful. Okay? So if you're reviewing, it would be good to familiarize yourself with the review tools of Microsoft Word, because it's going to help you track the changes, especially if they are going to give you back the manuscript for second review. Why are you getting it back? Because in your decision, you tick the box accepted for publication with on the condition that the author is going to comply with the suggestions. Those are your suggestions. Therefore, the journal editor will give it back to you for second reading or for third reading. Okay? So it will be easier for you to track the changes if the author has indeed done some changes in the manuscript that you have reviewed. So make use of the review tools of Microsoft Word. So it is in that review tool where you are now going to write your specific comments and your suggestions. Next slide, please. Okay. So when you're going to do the review, you write your comments on the parts of the research article, the different parts of the research article, bearing in mind the policies and the guidelines of the research journal. Okay. You start with the title because you have read it already. You have read already the entirety of the journal, not just once, but twice. Because the first time that you read it in one sitting. And in the second time that you read it when you were writing your comments. Okay. And then go back again to the title first. Is it an appropriate title for the study? This is a common error that I noticed. Some authors would write the title of their thesis or the title of their dissertation. When you are going to publish your paper, use title by result. Title by result means the title of your research article bears the important finding or the important result that you uncovered in your research. Do not use title by scope. Title by scope is your research title. It's your thesis or your dissertation title. Okay? Because when you are going to publish in a journal, you don't publish everything. You publish only that which is worth publishing. And therefore, the title of your study, the title of your publication becomes totally different from the title of your research. Okay. So take this for an example. The effectiveness of the teaching strategies of college teachers in improving the academic performance of students. That is titled by school. That is the title of your research. Okay, so you investigated the effectiveness of some teaching strategies, whether they improve the academic performance of the students. Now, you found out that there are certain teaching strategies that are effective and you would like now to publish them in a journal. That is what you are going to publish. Therefore, you change now the title of your study. Choose that which is significant. If your title is Teaching Strategies of College Teachers and Academic Performance of Students, that is still not a research. That is still not title by result. That's still title by school. Actually, in that title, it is implying that your method also is correlation. You have correlated teaching strategies of the college students vis-a-vis the academic performance of the students. If you discovered in that study that this is the teaching strategy that is contributory to the improvement of the academic performance of students, then that is what you are going to publish. Do not publish those which are not contributory to the improvement of the academic performance of the students. Okay, so take note that when you review the title, make sure that the title reflects the significant findings of the study. Next slide. Next, check if the objectives jive with the title or it matches the title. Usually, when you're going to publish your article in a journal, you convert your research questions into objectives. If you're still going to write your specific problem, number 1, number 2, number 3, that is a thesis style. You have answered those in your research. But which one? Which of your research questions has the most significant result? That is what you are going to convert into an objective. Okay, so I repeat, when you are going to publish, convert the research questions into objectives. So if you are the reviewer and you notice that what the researcher has written are still the research questions, then you recommend for their conversion into objectives. Okay, so for example, to determine the relationship between teaching strategy and academic performance of students, that's done already. Okay, that was done already. That is not an objective for your paper. To determine the effective strategy that improve the academic performance of students, then that is an objective for your research article, because you have actually determined already that or those effective strategies, and those are the ones that you are going to present. And that is what we are going to review. Next slide, please. Okay. Next, does the abstract contain the required contents? Journals would require a limit to the number of words for an abstract. It's usually at least 150 words and at most 300 words. And of course, you know the rule. If you're a reviewer and someone has written an in-text citation in the abstract, you recommend that the in-text citation be removed because it has no place in the abstract. So when you are reviewing a paper, check if the contents, the required contents of the abstract are present. That one, which I highlighted in white, that is an introduction to the research topic. Okay, a striking statement that introduces the research topic. The second one, that is the, what is this? Methodology. Okay, the methodology that the author used in the study. And that highlighted in black, those are the findings. Actually, it is the findings that you should focus on. Okay, and later you go back, after you have read the contents, you go back to the abstract and check if the abstract is comprehensive enough to capture the significant findings that were presented by the author. Next slide, please. Okay. This is where we as peer reviewers take time to critique the contents of the paper. This is important because it is in this part where this is actually the reason why you are publishing. And as peer reviewers, it is our responsibility to ensure that there is something new in the research article, that it contributes to knowledge, that there is faithful adherence to the method, and that the information is valid, it is of quality. Okay. So we check if the discussions are aligned to the objective. That's why you should always think of the objective when you are critiquing the content. That is actually your focus. Okay. So when reading the content, always bear in mind, is this one addressing a particular objective, or this section here is off tangent from the objective. It is not at all contributory to the attainment of the objective of the paper. Check also if the discussions are clear and well supported by data in the study. Although, of course, after the peer review, someone is going, there's another group that's going to do the language editing. Although, if it is already found in the author's guide that before you're going to submit your article for peer review, you should have subjected your paper for language editing, not content editing, because that is that's one of the functions of the editor, or the peer reviewer. Okay, so check if the paper has been subjected for a language editing, if it is part of the journal policy, which actually should be. Because if you are not going to subject your paper for language editing, there is high possibility that the peer reviewer is going to tick the decision box for reject for publication. Excuse me. Okay. There are many online tools anyway that you can use in order to check the language of your paper, if it is good. Now, if you are the reviewer and you want to go the extra mile of checking the language used in the paper, and you are familiar also with online tools, then on your initiative, you check the language of the paper. When I say language, I am not just referring to the grammar, to the grammatical structure of the paper. I'm also referring to the language of the method of the paper. Okay. So aside from that, you check if the discussions are well supported by data that are found in the paper. Because there are times that some authors write information without any supporting claims. They claim, okay, they write claims without any supporting data. That should be one of the things that you as a peer reviewer should pay attention to see to it that the information contained in the paper are supported by data that are found in the study. Okay. Ask yourself also, are the corroborating literature relevant to the findings? Okay. Although if you are talking of research related to culture, we should not actually be asking for corroborating literature. But in many descriptive studies, if the paper you are reviewing is using a descriptive design, then it would be good to look at the corroborating literature. There are times that authors will use this result from an author, from a previous research, to corroborate the findings, but then they seem mismatched. Let's say the topic is about the online learning of students. And then what was used as a corroborating literature is online teaching platforms used by teachers. So there's already a mismatch. We cannot say that a study related to online teaching methods would corroborate the result of a study about the learning of the students. Okay, so that's another thing that we have to look for when we are referring or reviewing an article. We ask ourselves also, are the tables or the graphs used in the paper accurately presented? Because there are certain instances whereby the figures in the graph or in the table do not match the textual discussion. Probably there is a typographical error. So we should note that one. We cannot overlook it. We cannot say, no, it is just a minor error. No. If you are presenting a table with data, with facts, the same should be reflected in the textual discussion. Otherwise, it would compromise the accuracy of the information contained in the paper. In short, it compromises the validity of the research article. Also, another thing that we would look at is if there are too many tables and too many graphs, is there a possibility of collapsing them into just one table or two or three tables? When I say collapsing them, I mean putting the information together in a single table instead of having so many tables that it actually just makes your paper long. So instead of reading vital information, what we are seeing are just tables, tables, tables. And we do not really understand the content of the tables. So if you notice that there is a possibility of collapsing the tables, the graphs, the figures, then recommend. It would be good if you could, as a reviewer, if you could create a sample table for the author to follow. It would really be very helpful on the part of the author. Are there also important developments in the field which you believe were missed by the author? It is important that they should be contained in the research article, but the author just missed to include this information. Especially if the journal requires review of related literature. Okay, check the section on the review of related literature if the information, if there are developments in the field that you know of, which are not reflected in that paper. Take note, you are chosen by the journal editor as a peer reviewer because of your expertise, probably your content expertise. And it is expected that you are also updated of recent developments in your field so that you could contribute to the enhancement of the paper. Right? So if there are some developments that recent developments that you believe are necessary and they are not found in the paper, you recommend it. Okay, you refer them to the journal where the information is contained, where you give them the link to the journal, the link to the website where the information could be found. And most importantly, is there new knowledge from the study? Actually, this is a question that you should ask the first time that you read the manuscript in one sitting. When you reflect on what you have read, ask yourself, have I learned something new? Don't I know this already? Don't I know that already? Has the research article contributed to your knowledge? Or it is just a repetition of what we already know? And so the question there is there a need? Is there still a need to do this study when there are so many there are so many studies that are conducted about it already? We know the answer already. It's common sense research. There's no need to go to there's no need to do this study. Well, that is your discretion as a reviewer. If after reading the paper you discovered that, well, you know the information there, there's nothing new, then that can be one of the comments that you are going to write to the editor. Confidential comments for the editor. Okay, next slide. After critiquing the content, you critique the conclusion. Now, ask yourself this question after reading the conclusion. Is there a clear answer to the question, to the research problem? Take note that the objective of the study reflects the research problem. What was investigated by the researcher? Okay? So you have read the results in the contents. Now you read the conclusion. Is there now an answer, a clear answer to the research problem? Or the conclusion is just an enumeration of the findings which are discussed in the section of results and discussion. If you cannot find a clear answer to the research problem, then note that. Give it as a comment. Again, also ask, are the research findings clearly and adequately synthesized? This is again one of the weaknesses of some authors who intend to publish. Their conclusion is an enumeration or a listing of the findings. No, we write the conclusion in a paragraph format. We conclude by synthesizing the results that we have presented. And most importantly, in the conclusion, did the author reflect the knowledge, the new knowledge derived from the study? Okay? The contribution of the paper to the body of knowledge, was it reflected in the conclusion? And then lastly, what about the literature that are cited? Is there a matching between the in-text citations and the literature that is cited? In many cases, again, I came across some papers where I know that the author did not make use of any literature organizer software, because there are some literature cited that were not mentioned in the results and discussion, in the introduction or background of the study. Or there are some in-text citations that were not reflected in the literature cited. If you are the author of the article, it would be good to familiarize yourself with the use of some literature organizer software. There are those that are free online. For example, the use of Mendeley. Mendeley is free. Okay? And Mendeley, what is good about Mendeley also is that it automatically formats your references, your in-text citations, according to the reference style or reference format of the journal. So if it is APA, all you have to do is click APA and automatically Mendeley is going to format your in-text citations and your literature cited according to the requirements of APA. Okay? But if you want added features, then maybe you subscribe to EndNote. That is the paid version of Mendeley. Okay? There is also Zotero, if you are more familiar with that tool. Okay? So if you're going to use this, actually, it's going to prevent you from committing errors in formatting your citation or citing your citations in the literature that you have cited. So it is also our responsibility as reviewers to check if there is a matching between the in-text citations and the literatures that are enumerated in that section. Next slide. Okay, now, in relation to ethics in peer review, I would recommend these ones when giving comments and suggestions. I've come across some webinar speakers. They are esteemed personalities in the field who would say that when we give comments and suggestions, we have to be, one side says, very rational. It doesn't matter if the author will be hurt. Others would say, while we are rational, we should also consider the feelings of the author who is reading our comments and suggestions. It's up to you, if you're a peer reviewer, which side you are going to take. Rational, or a combination of being rational and considerate of the emotions of the author. Okay. So you will give reasons for the recommendation. It is a principle of peer review or refereeing that when we comment, we have to give a suggestion. If we say this is not appropriate, why not try this one? It would be better, maybe it will make your study better if you are going to do this one. Your presentation will be better if you are going to present it this way. Okay? Do not simply write there, why is this? Why is it like this? No, you change this. What's the reason for the change? So we have to suggest possible alternatives for the changes. Like in the case of so many tables, if you notice that the author has so many tables, so many figures, so many graphs, and it is a descriptive study, you would have that idea that, hey, this author does not know how to present data. Then help by creating the table yourself and giving it as a sample. Give examples, especially when you recommend for recasting the statement, because the statement is somewhat vague. So maybe you can say, probably it will be better if you do it this way. And then you write the statement. Suggest relevant readings that may increase the value of the paper. Okay? Because as I said, are there recent developments that are included in the paper? So if there are none, then you have to suggest some readings. And this is one thing that we should not do, because we are peer reviewers, we are not panel members, we are not internal reviewers. We are reviewing the paper for possibility of publication in the journal. So we should not recommend to the author to regather the data, because in the first place, the study was completed already. It went through a review by the panel members. It went through a review by their institution. So it is insulting also the other entities if we are going to recommend to the author to regather the data or to change the methodology or to change the objectives. That is not our role. In our hand is a paper that was already critiqued by panel members, critiqued by institutional reviewers. And the author would like to publish it in a journal. And the journal editor would like us to help them determine the quality of the paper. So our role is to do a review of the completed study, not to make the researcher regather data, change the methodology because we believe it is not the correct methodology or the methodology is flawed. It is not on our part to recommend to change the objectives. But if we believe that the data is defective, yes, in most cases, yes, there are data that are defective, but we will not recommend for regathering. The data is defective because the design is defective. But we will not recommend for change in methodology. The discussion does not fit the objectives, but we are not going to recommend to change the objectives. What we are going to do is write this observation in that section for confidential note to the editor. And that could be the reason why we are rejecting the paper for publication, but we should not do this once. We have to remember that the paper we have in our hand is a completed research, and it has undergone initial quality assessment. Next slide. And then lastly, the last thing that we will do now is to answer the evaluation form. Yes. Alongside the resource article that is forwarded to you by the journal editor is their evaluation form. It sets the criteria. Okay. So evaluate the paper. You have already pre-evaluated it. You have taken down notes already. Now, check the evaluation form. It's actually easier to assess the paper, to write already your comments in the evaluation form if you have pre-evaluated or pre-assessed the paper. We have to be very objective. Sometimes when you, actually this happened to me several times, I could not understand what the author is talking about in the paper. So I know that my blood pressure is rising because my body temperature is also increasing. But I could not write there that I cannot understand what you're talking about, etc., etc. No, I cannot do that. As a peer reviewer, I have to be objective and I have to consider the impact of my words, the impact of what I am going to write on the morale of the author. Okay? So, be objective. Indicate the reasons for rejection or acceptance. comments. Yes, as I mentioned a while back, there is the confidential note for the editor. Then summarize our comments and suggestions. That is what we are going to write in the note for the author and note for the editor, which should match each other. These comments and suggestions are derived from what we had been writing in our review of the content of the paper. If there are other comments, I talked about that already. The comments for the author. There are some journals that actually do not include this in their evaluation tool, but it is very helpful because you synthesize, you summarize the comments, and then disclose in the notes to the editor some confidential information about the paper. Those things that you do not want the author to read because you do not want to hurt the feelings of the author, you do not want to lower down the morale of the author and eventually demotivate the author from resubmitting the paper. Okay, next slide. I think that is the end of my presentation. So to summarize, the process of peer review. One, our role as peer reviewer is actually as gatekeepers of the quality of journal publication. We work hand in hand with the journal editors. So we have to respect the peer review process of the journals. There are some journals whose peer review process is different from the other journals. So you have to be familiar with the policies and guidelines for the peer reviewer of the journal. Okay, so as peer reviewers, we are accountable for the quality of the paper that is published. We have to consider the impact of our review to the morale of the author of the article. Because it can happen that if we are very harsh in writing our review, which most of the time scientists do, they are really very harsh, it could not demotivate the author from a second or a third submission of the paper. So we have to remember that our role is as a gatekeeper of journal quality, and that we have to adhere to ethical standards of peer review. And if you want to know more about ethics in peer reviewing and the responsibilities of peer reviewers, you consult the website of the Committee on Publication Ethics. And if you are also tapped as a peer reviewer, remember that you have to ask yourself whether you are competent to do a review of the paper. If you think the topic is within your specialization, but the methodology is something that you are not familiar with, it is okay to accept the paper, but indicate that you did not review the methodology section because you are not familiar with the method or the design of the study. Okay, or even if you are not familiar with the method, you are familiar with the topic, you might decide to not accept the paper. Or you might just decide to turn down the review for the paper. Whichever, the decision is yours. But always remember, our responsibility as peer reviewers is to help the journal editors filter the articles that are being published in journals. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for your wonderful presentation. It has been very informative presentation. Ma'am, now it's time for our quiz session. After completed quiz session, we come back again in our question and answer session. Okay, ma'am? Dear participants, time for our quiz session. To join this session, you have to go www.slido.com. Then you have to enter the code, and the code is IGP2. And the code is IGP2. Dear participant, to join this session, you have to go www.slido.com. Then you have to enter the code. The code is IGP2. After a short video, we will start our quiz session. So let's enjoy our quiz session. It's time for our quiz session. To join this session, you have to go www.slido.com. Then you have to enter the code, and the code is IGP2. And the code is IGP2. We'll pick your name from Slido, so join with your full name, which will directly print on certificates, and top 10 will be awarded with quiz completion certificate. Already 35 people join in our quiz session. We are still waiting for your joining, so please everyone join early in our quiz session. And don't forget to mention your friends to join our quiz session. We have Princess Love, Di Tolinitu, Inelita Quater Villanio, Joel Barnasar, then we have my Mr. Tarashina, then we have Kingui Ishia, then we have Evelyn Piwapedi, then we have Jamayang Rahmo SHHH, Jambi Baldagu, Lei Pakunola, then we have Garifa Ribara, Jamalian B. Rivara, then we have Binranda A. Gordon, then we have Mohammad Nasiruddin, then we have Jemima B. Sabilu, then we have Jordan Joy S. Giotina, then we have Brianna, then we have Violeta, then we have Genial Villa Recension. Dear participant, we are still waiting for your joining, so please everyone join in our quiz session. Join this session, you have to go www.slido.com. Then you have to enter the code. And the code is IGP2. And the code is IGP2. Dear participant, we are still waiting for your joining. joining. And the correct answer is no, and 9% people are right. Now we go for our sixth now question. A journal article that is published 6 years ago is considered current. Is it yes or no? And the correct answer is no. And 64% people are right. And the correct answer is no. 64% people are right. Next question is, which research is most likely to be rejected according to critics? Negative evaluation point. Is it research against current views? Second option, research which accept the alternative hypothesis. And the correct answer is first option, research against current views, and 66% people are right. Now, now our top one is Flomi or Salviejo. Eighth now question. The following is an example on how to reference a journal article using APA format. Is it yes or no? And the correct answer is no, and only 3% people are right. And again, our top one is Swami. Then we look for our ninth question. Who's planning on referring the Quidditch match? Is it Snap or second option MC Gonagar? We have only 8 seconds. And the correct answer is Snap, and on 56% people are right. And now we go for our last question. The guidelines dash that all human subject research required informed, is it limited or second option is stipulated? And the correct answer is stipulated, and 81% people are right. Congratulations, top 10. And our top ranker is Flomi Arsalviejo. Congratulations, Flomi. Then we have in our second position Joel Aprecio Barnasar. In third position, Queenie Rose. In fourth position, Aaron Ged as CC Salviojo. In fifth position, Genuine Villa Restoration. Congratulations, our top 10 quiz competition and winner. We have all of your name which you entered during joining. We'll pick your name and prepare certificate and we'll post them on our Facebook official page. And our Facebook official page is Institution of Global Professional. Dear participant, it's time for our question answer session. If you have any question from our speaker, so please ask your question in our comment box. Participants are requested to ask their question in comment box. Please address speaker name. Welcome back, ma'am. Hello, ma'am. Hello, ma'am. Welcome back, ma'am, in our question answer session. We will go ahead and take some time for question now. Just a reminder, please be sure to type your question into the comment box. Ma'am, our first question from our Facebook user. Great afternoon, ma'am. Rodha. What are the qualifications to become a peer reviewer? Thanks.
It is up to the journal editor because there are some journals that will give a call for peer review board. You submit your CV, your curriculum vitae, and it is up to them to check if you meet the requirements. But basically, for you to be a peer reviewer, you should know the process of doing a research, and you should be updated with the recent developments in your field.
Oh, sorry. Our second question from Flomi. Good afternoon, ma'am. Recap, what is the main purpose of peer review? Why is it important in research?
The main purpose of peer review is to help the editors maintain one to help the editors maintain the reputation of their journal by ensuring that the papers that will be published are accurate, they are valid, and they are of good quality. And of course, on the part of the author, peer review helps them increase the value of their research, knowing that their paper has been critiqued or refereed by experts in the field. The the value of peer review is not just seen on the part of the journal, but it is also seen on the part of the author.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Dear
Yes.
participate, we are still waiting for your question. If you have any question, you can ask in our comment box. Ma'am, it look like we covered all of our question. Is there anything else you want to tell our participant?
If there are some of you out there who are intending to submit their research article for publication, I suggest that you familiarize yourselves with the peer review process of the journal or you intend to submit your paper. And before you submit your paper, check the policy of the journals. All journals have an author's guide where the authors are guided as to how they are going to format their papers in terms of the parts of the article to be submitted and the referencing style, the referencing style that they are going to use. But be careful of what we consider or what we call as the predatory journals. Many predatory journals do not have a peer review process. If your paper was accepted and then you are notified that it will be published in 3 or 4 days, that is red flag. Red flag in the sense that it could be an indication that the journal is a predatory journal.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Please accept on behalf of IGP our profound thanks for taking out the time from your busy schedule to present those slides about referring a research article. I know that everyone sitting there was fascinated by your presentation. Those slides give everyone a great idea about referring a research article. We gain a lot of information in one place. Again, I would like to offer our thanks for your precious time and share your knowledge with us. I hope everyone can learn from your presentation. Thank you so much, ma'am. Dear participant, it's time for to give you our webinar code. Today, our topic is referring a research article. And the code and our webinar code is IGP198. Today, our program name is referring a research article and the code is IGP1982. Without code, no one is eligible for certificates. With code, you can claim your certificates anytime. Thank you everyone for your active participation. I hope everyone can learn from our webinar. See you in our next session. Till then, stay happy and blessed. Thank you so much.